Ahoy, and welcome. This is Admiral. Today we'll begin to consider a whole new world of possible American content that could be added to the game, and indeed might be based on some new-ish information. In this video we'll be discussing that information from Zetnus, and my thoughts about new South American content more generally. And in the next video on this topic we'll look at my top 5 possible civilizations for South America. I was going to do it all together, but as happens, it got rather lengthy. Zetnus is a good follow if you're interested in changes to map scripts, as well as early looks at new units, objects, and voice lines, as unlike myself, he does have early access to DLCs, and we'll shortly be getting into his insights that partially precipitated this video. Before we get into it, I have to acknowledge that the last base game DLC, The Three Kingdoms, muddled the base game's theme and setting quite substantially, diminishing the predictive value of information and watering down some players' excitement for and confidence in the handling of future base game DLCs, in spite of many otherwise promising developments. So standard disclaimer that speculation is suspect now more than ever, and even a correct prediction as to the broader setting of future editions carries with it the possibility of further departures from the traditional scope and setting of the game. Not much that I can do about that, except mention it from time to time, and hope it's addressed in a meaningful way, as it has not been to date. Whether or not the speculation is correct, this is a topic I've been wanting to cover for a long time. In fact, the last draft that I'm adapting this script from was written over a year and a half ago. I bring that up because as a part-time YouTuber and a full-time sweaty tryhard, I'd love to be able to make videos much more frequently, and with no shortage of ideas, but the generally small reach of my channel greatly limits the time I can afford to put into this. In short, this is your occasional reminder to engage Max with mine and other small channels you enjoy.
Mandatum, liking, mandatum, subscribing.
As hard work in this age seems to be far less fruitful on average than when the AoE2 niche, and YouTube at large, was not so awash with content. So, hoping for the best on all fronts, let's proceed. Zetnus mentions in his video that he or someone in the RMS community found references to new animals in the publicly available random map scripts before the latest Chronicles DLC was released. Those references have since been removed, but they have made a list of the animals. I'll link to his video in the description, but the gist of the list is here. And the overall best fit as to region is of course South America, and it does include capybaras as well. This is pretty cool whether or not it will be connected with other South American editions, up to a full DLC. Of course it's obvious to make that last connection, and that's what he does here. But before we dive too far into that, I want to entertain a few other possibilities. One of course is that the addition of animals in a future update is just to cover major gaps in fauna for purposes of existing campaigns and maps in South and Mesoamerica, which in spite of their high biodiversity are among the worst represented in a variety of ways. Considering the current scarcity of specifically New World animals, it's fair to say that having little else to hear than the growl of the jaguar is a bad omen. This is also applicable to the entire absence of unique hero sprites for Mesoamerica, and the almost entire lack of eye candy for all of North and South America and Africa. I and others have been hoping and asking for more assets for those regions for a long time, which look especially bare in contrast to the wealth of new objects for Chronicles civilizations. Chronicles has certainly raised the bar, but it's also unmistakably demonstrated how low the bar has otherwise been in some categories, particularly involving new assets and architecture. So I'd like to see future base game DLCs at least attempt to bridge some of that obvious effort gap. The notable exception was of course the large graphical update in April, which was and is fantastic, but which I think represents the majority of new base game assets in the 6 years since the launch of Definitive Edition. Whatever your thoughts on the need for and suitability of new American civilizations in Ranked, there's an undisputable poverty of content even to portray the existing civilizations and their stories in a compelling way, up to and including regional unit skins, which we've considered elsewhere, and which were begun long ago with the Conqueror's Expansion's edition of Mesoamerican monk and trade cart skins, but with no additions save castles since then. A DLC may be the most obvious way to address this, but it's certainly not the only way. Frankly, this same caveat holds true with the upcoming water rework. People want to connect it with a DLC that adds notable naval civilizations, which is certainly a possibility, but I would not assume this yet. Though my hunch is that the South American connection is more likely than the naval connection. Consider that most of the various infantry reworks over the years, including the large Gambeson's patch, were not part of any infantry-focused DLCs or DLCs at all. And in the case of the water overhaul, it seems like enough to digest on its own without new civilizations accompanying it, especially right on the heel of the most content-heavy releases in Definitive Edition earlier this year. It's possible to have a significant addition of assets without a DLC, or to have a DLC without the addition of significant assets. See Mountain Royals and Victors and Vanquished in particular, but really most of the base game DLCs have been pretty sparse when it comes to new graphics besides those for the obligatory unique units and buildings. In any case, whether an update or a full expansion is on the horizon, we are getting some specifically South American content as outlined by Zetnus, so it makes sense to think of a few other things apart from animals that we'd like to see for South America specifically. Flora, and especially New World fruits, are very high on my list. Passion fruit, guava, avocado, guanabana, acai, pineapple, lucuma, chirimoya, and so many others are great candidates for new forage bush reskins, or new dual resource fruit trees that provide food and wood. Optional farm reskins or variants would also be welcomed for New World crops such as squash, and especially maize, one of the underrated technological products of ancient Americans accomplished over thousands of years of selective breeding. Regional trees such as mahogany, cebas, the Brazil nut and Brazil tree, rubber trees, and others would be welcomed. And other plants such as vanilla orchids, chilies, and cacao trees might provide gold as luxury foods and spices. I know this isn't Age of Botany, but I will not rest until our people have chocolate after these 26 long years. More eye candy would be nice as well, such as appropriate weapon racks with bronze axes, halberds, clubs, star-studded maces, obsidian-edged weapons, and other regional manufacturers such as polychrome pottery, jugs of maize beer, Andean textiles, spondylus beads, carved stone and metal artifacts, and so forth. Not all of this is necessary, of course, but if World's Edge is going to make a Meso or South American DLC, I'd want it to be high effort. Last up for graphical changes should be an actual architecture set for the Incas and possible Andean adjacent civilizations. This one is probably the most obvious, but I've saved it for last because it's not likely except in connection with new Andean civilizations, which I'll consider in part in the next video. There are some very loose similarities between the Meso set and Inca architecture, but some major differences for the latter are much more sloped roofs, terracing, and trapezoidal doorways as seen in the Wonder and Castle. The irregular stone blocks should also be much larger for big buildings and stone walls, as there's currently nothing in the game that resembles Inca Cyclopean masonry. The set might also have a mild reddish-brown or sandy tint to make it compatible with adobe structures. Apart from the partial measures we've considered, South America is an appealing option for a full DLC for a number of reasons, even though I'd have a hard time Peruvian for certain that this is what the devs are going to do next. Not least of which is historical variety, as one of the 6 areas considered pristine or cradles of civilization, where civilization was thought to have developed independently, it's rather strange to have it represented by a sole empire. In terms of gameplay, the Inca campaign could surely use some diversity as well. It's regularly panned as one of the worst, in large part due to having no variety at the civilization level, apart from those awkwardly borrowed from Mesoamerica, along with the ill-fitting Mesoamerican architecture set. I personally struggled to finish the Pachacuri campaign, not because of any difficulty in the standard sense, but because it was so thoroughly bland that I had to constantly reaffirm my will to live. No. There's also a lot of good design territory that is not covered well by the Incas, or not covered at all. Admittedly, no potential South American civilization can match the superpower that was the Inca Empire in terms of sheer size and might, but that's true in comparing old world civilizations as well, with Vikings, Koreans, and really almost everyone else looking quite silly matched up against the Mongol Empire at its peak. But of course these civilizations can still have other standout elements that make them good choices. The other alpaca in the room when it comes to New World civilizations, and especially those in South America, is the lack of written records, especially for several major civilizations that went into decline or were absorbed by successive states long before the arrival of the Spanish. This, along with technological limitations, definitely makes some possible Civ candidates controversial, and limits the details available for accurate campaigns especially. Still, I think there are a few solid candidates that have the potential to be added as civilizations, which we'll consider next time. Anyway, those are my general thoughts on a possible South American DLC, admittedly rather rambling, and some wishes for the type of high-effort content I hope is added with or without a DLC, and broadly applicable to other regions. Let me know what you think. That's all for today, and thanks for watching. This has been me pondering prey, predators, plants, and pure potential of a possible pre-Columbian pack. Till next time.